You're watching TVC Breakfast. It's time now to take a look at stories making headlines on Nigerian newspapers this morning. We've got about 13 of them with us that we'll be checking out. And it's so far from what we have gleaned from them, it's divergent stories. Let's see First News now. Another boat tragedy hits Adamawa State. That's on First News. 11 are dead 48 hours after 8 other persons drowned in Rugange, Yola South local government area. This is a major cause of concern, and details are there in the First News. Nigerian News Direct now. Nigerians hail President Tinubu as the United Arab Emirates lifts visa ban, establishes new foreign exchange liquidity program with Nigeria. So many other policies have also been announced in the fallout of the meeting between both the Nigerian and the UAE leaders, which we touched on briefly at the start of the program this morning. And this Nigeria is next. This Nigeria is also reporting on the positive news from Dubai, saying you can now fly into Dubai from Nigeria, with President Tinubu breaking the visa ban on Nigerians after meeting the UAE president. Daily Sun is also reporting on this lifting of the visa ban on Nigerian travelers, adding that the decision was taken after a parley between President Tinubu and Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan of the UAE. Finally, with me is Daily Trust, still on the revocation of the visa ban, with flights, businesses resume as Nigeria and the UAE resolve row. All right, that's, the much that we can take on Daily Trust. Ibraheem has more, right?
Right, Leadership newspaper is the first with me here. Nigeria-UAE deal. Experts predict rise in foreign investment, revenue boost. Express hope of reduced airfares as Emirates Etihad return to Nigerian airspace. Experts predict rise in foreign investments, revenue boost. That's according to the Leadership newspaper. Business Day. Big story, U.S. visa denials squeeze Nigerian students. Nigeria students hit 30-year high in 2022. That's the U.S. Embassy. Big story, U.S. visa denials squeeze Nigerian students. Nigeria students hit 30-year high in 2022. That's the U.S. Embassy. The Nation newspaper is next. Mixed fortunes for APC, PDP, Labour at tribunals. Mixed fortunes for APC, PDP, Labour Party at tribunals. That's the Nation newspaper. Daily Independent. Masses won't eat good policies. Intentions, good policies, intentions. NASU tells President Tinubu, masses won't eat good policies, intentions. NASU tells Tinubu, asks federal government to resuscitate oil refineries, probe monies for repairs. That's the Daily Independent there. The Punch newspaper is next. President Tinubu's special investigator faults CBN audited reports. Tinubu's special investigator faults CBN audited reports. That's the Punch newspaper. The next is Blueprint. Nigeria needs 21 trillion naira to fix 28 million housing deficit. That's according to Vice President Kashim Shettima. Nigeria needs 21 trillion naira to fix 28 million housing deficit. That's the Blueprint newspaper. The next is Daily Times. If I see 1 billion naira, I'll faint. That's former governor. Says if he sees 1 billion naira, he'll faint. Well, I don't know how far-reaching that sounds. That's the Daily Times. Next is Salient Times. Gas flaring. Nigeria loses $22.9 billion in 10 years. Nostra. Gas flaring. Nigeria loses $22.9 billion in 10 years. That's Nostra. That's the very last term we have there.
Ibrahim, all right. So there are a lot of, stories, divergent stories there. First, with the resumption of flights and businesses, as Nigeria and the UAE resolve row. But our particular interest would be on the story. We haven't touched on that yet, and that is the spate of boat tragedies that have been on record. Over the weekend, it was the worrisome developments that occurred in Niger State of a boat capsizing in the Gbajibo community in Mokwa local council area of the state. 30 dead as of yesterday.
That's right.
Some were able to escape, those who could swim, by the way. And now looking at First News, it's also replicated in various papers, but it made the headline. It's the biggest headline on First newspaper. Another boat tragedy, it says, hitting Adamawa State, this time around in Kwatanmalam, Adamu, this in Gorin Village, Fufore local government area of Adamawa State. And only 48 hours ago, it says that 11 had died. Okay, 11 are recorded to have died in this latest boat tragedy in Adamawa State, but it occurred 48 hours after 8 persons drowned in Rugange, Yola South local government area. And from the sketchy information that's coming in at the moment, there was an impending rain, and it appeared it was going to be very heavy. So the farmers wanted to beat the looming rains and crammed into the only available boat, that is, and strong winds, thunderstorms occurring, and the boat capsized. And 11 are dead. They say there are still about 20 more missing. And this is worrisome indeed. And the government in Niger State, for example, has already, sent in its condolence messages. But when you look at the factors that could have arisen, the fact that there is no report that these people were kitted as they should have been, to embark on a boat ride, the issue of life jackets, did we have, divers, local divers on the standby to, rush out? And by the way, there was heavy rains at the time.
Well, it's a very sad thing to hear this morning, not this morning, but the fact that, this happened in Niger State just about 2 days ago. This has also happened in Adamawa State, apart from the one that happened, yesterday. It happened where they lost about 20 people, and this time around about 11. It means that it is a usual occurrence. You said these people, those affected, the victims, were in a rush to, get on the other side, via the ferry. But, it's always been said, the saying has it that slow and steady wins the race, or it's better to be late than be late.
Sorry.
Right? So it's something that we need to really pay attention to. Government should not be expected to do everything for us. Our own first precaution or safety should start with us before the government. Okay, well, the government will always definitely do, its own part. So what is the response rate? Just like you said, the divers, how readily available are they? But then we should not always expect divers to correct our own embarkation mistakes. Do you understand? In the sense that what is the condition of the ferry? What is the experience of the person, of the sailor, himself or herself? What is the safety regulations around there? You mentioned the safety vest, that's a life jacket. How available should it be, especially for the young ones, the children and the women who are most vulnerable, in these local communities? So all of these safety regulations should be put in place, and also look at how compliant all of these regulations, followed through. So, it's a mixed, bag of things. We just feel that we'll just keep talking about it and asking the government to do the right thing, and the people, the local government, the local councillors, and all of that. They should keep doing, everything, doing the right thing, and ensuring that they get everyone's life, in a very good state, and no one is killed needlessly. So it's really very sad. They are having to face the issue of banditry, facing the issue of kidnapping, etc., and the fact that they also find it challenging to also go to their farmlands to farm. So all of this altogether, it's a very sad thing to hear in the morning. It's not so good to always be on air and be lamenting on some of these tragedies.
Because when you look at it, some of them, could have been preventable. But then you've raised some critical points. You can also add that in these areas, perhaps the only means of transportation is
the ferries.
The ferries, is through the waters, and perhaps the roads are, not in good shape, which is also another problem, because we are in September, which is touted as the heaviest part of the year in terms of rains. And I used to doubt it, because I don't know how I failed to recollect past experiences. I thought it was August, but
the fact that
so far from what we've seen,
there's climate change.
September,
the climate conditions as well, global warming, and we're seeing the impact. I was talking to my sister who is abroad, saying that it was heat all through. Imagine London, very heat,
Europe,
air. They had to sleep outside, under the tree. So, all of this, so the climate effect and all of that. So we expect that,
in our
own side, the impact will also be felt, and the windy. The fact that things are not going to be really normal. So if the mother nature is not normal, I think we should, act normally so as to not, fall victims of, the effect, the impact of this, on us. Indeed,
one should really brace up, especially when one looks at one's environment. One needs to brace up for the heavy rains. Already warnings, advance warnings have been, sent out to states that could be badly hit if care is not taken. And this is a yearly tradition of, wars, of losses, of loss of lives, and, property, food, crops, and, so much more being at risk of, this destruction. We saw the farmlands that washed away in the 2022 rains, and even so much more losses. And now we are taking count of, yet more loss of lives. And already in response to the Adamawa boat tragedy now, the government, as I said earlier on, has spoken out. The deputy governor of the state, Kaleta Puafarauta, visited the earlier accident sites, the one that occurred in the Yola South local government area. This latest one happened in Fufore local government area, and has directed the State Emergency Management Agency to identify all crossing points in the state so that life jackets can be provided for passengers.
It's so appalling that life jackets are not made available.
And these are basic.
Exactly.
These are basic, utilities, absolutely. And it's also coming as, according to this paper, that officials of the state agency have also asked operators of inland waterways in the state to avoid overloading in bad weather periods, which is also another issue. If that is the time where farmers would work, how much or how many boats, how many boats do we have in the area that will make everybody to cram themselves up into the available? And you know how treacherous the waters can be at this point, with many waters overflowing their banks. And there's so many issues that we expect that we would have gone past this stage, where of course you can try so much. There are some things that indeed beyond your control, but it's an annual tradition. The rains fall every time. We live in the part of the country where we can indeed, we have our regular rains, even though how ready are we now to forestall the impact of the heavy rains is another question. But we know that the rains are coming, and what steps are we taking in advance to ensure that while we are rejoicing that the rains have come and then our crops can grow, we shouldn't be afraid that the rains have come and our lives are at stake.
I think it's also, just like you said, it's also very important that we don't overcrowd, the ferries or any available means of transportation, because the fact that that's overload. I'm not sure what our problem is with overload. We've got information overload. We've got vehicle overload. We even see on social media where you have people carrying cows on Okada, our local way of a motorcycle, calling motorcycle, right. Carrying cow, as huge as it is, putting on a motorcycle, and you also have families, still mounting the same bike. So I feel, all of these things, the palliatives, the fact that the government can also come in, give them, some of these things to make sure that they have what's it called? To be able to move easily from one point to the other. Because if they are able to go to their farmlands, move cultivate, harvest, and then move this produce rather
Right.
to the other parts of the community, and then from there they move it to the urban areas where they'll have these things sold. So if they don't have all of this, ease of access, then we'll keep recording, tragedy over tragedy. But this is not what we want in a country of ours. We always want to talk about people who are in the rural areas, find in the rural areas, remote areas, but they are living fine, and they are also protected from, all of these calamities that are, easily, avertible.
Right, and we cannot stress enough how much that, I don't know how much progress will be recorded, this year, because the rains are already upon us. So how much can we do to forestall the harsh impact of the heavy rains when you consider the warnings that have come in? And, poverty is also an issue. Even when the warnings come that those of you, if you remove these boat accidents now, those who are living in areas that, they shouldn't be living in plains that could put them at particular risk.
And then, prone areas.
Right, and then the warnings come for them to evacuate, to leave those areas in, ahead, or well ahead.
And they'll be asking, where do we go?
Where do we go to?
This is the only place we've always known, since our forefathers.
We expect the government to come, right, the emotional attachment
to
their areas, to their houses, where you say it was inherited, I got it from my ancestors and all that. And then the issue of poverty is a big problem, because many of these people look up. Their only hope is the government, and when government is not forthcoming, they get by in any way that they can. Even when they can see the obvious risks, they close their eyes to the obvious risks and let me just live. I only know of today, or I only know of right now.
That's
and this is definitely worrying. And the fact that our rural areas, what are we doing to develop our rural areas? The sentiment on the ground says only when it's time to vote that we remember our rural areas. That's why the urban areas are so overcrowded, and the governments are overwhelmed with the influx of people that troop into the city. Look at Lagos, almost on a daily basis, people coming in to seek the better life, greener pastures within Nigeria, but away from their state. This is also a problem, and it behoves on governments at all levels to be more feeling, to be more empathetic to the needs of people. Of course, this is something that one cannot stress, to be sure that people have better lives.
And when you talk about governments, I hope you're also referring to the fact that they have state governments.
Right, at all levels. Yes, that's what I said.
They've got local councillors and all of that, because oftentimes we always look at what is the budget for the federal government, what is the budget, not looking at exactly what the state government is doing to address some of these issues in these local communities, because they've been elected to represent them, to give them a better lease of life, and to also make them enjoy the dividends of democracy. So we can't leave them to their fate. We can't make them feel like they are not part of us in this country. We can't expect that everything will be done by them, because they also need to be guided. They need to be put, arise. They need to be showed the way. So if we are elected to these various positions, we should always do the right thing as government, because at the end of the day, if you are not accountable to humans, how would you be accountable to, God Almighty, for those of us who believe, in the existence of God?
The power of divinity.